I am Jim Collis from the Gallup campus here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Called the Coach EP10 edition, recorded on February 12th, 2016. Called the Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. In this case, we are focusing on our EP10, our Entrepreneurial Profile 10 tool. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you do have questions during this live webcast that we're doing, there's a chat room available right below the main video window there at the coach's blog. You can log in using a guest account, bottom left-hand corner. Just hit log in, put your name in the guest line, hit submit, and you'll be in, and we'll be taking your questions live. If you do have questions around custom strengths coaching solutions for small, medium, or large organizations, you can contact us. Send us an email, coaching@gallup.com, or use the contact form that's available right there on the live page. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center, GallupStrengthsCenter.com, for all your coaching resources, StrengthsFinder, and EP10 training needs. You can also catch the video in both streaming and downloadable audio for offline listening to past shows, as well as the link to all our mobile products. They're all available through our coach's blog, coaching.gallup.com. Todd Johnson is our host today. Todd is a senior global channel leader for entrepreneurship and job creation. You laugh every time that, Todd.
Well, every time we do it, I get a new name. I get a new word in my title.
You do. Well, that's because you tell me later. You're like, oh, Jim, that's senior. And I have that on record, by the way, as you saying that last time.
Right, being recorded.
Todd works on the riverfront with me, and we always have a good time together when we do these EP10 updates. Now, these EP10 Called to Coaches. Todd, welcome to a Called to Coach.
Thanks, Jim. And I asked you earlier, how many of these have you done?
140 some, I think, is what we have available. Yeah.
I have a feeling today's could be the best.
It's going to be the best.
That's our goal.
Yeah, it's going to be the best. So, Todd, we have two agendas here today. One is to get an update kind of from you, a quick update, what's going on with the EP10, and then I'll ask you to introduce our guest, and we'll dig in with Erin.
Okay. Well, and actually, I'm going to save the update for the end.
Perfect.
So we'll kind of close with that. I want to get right to the guest. Super, super excited about having Erin join us today. Erin was one of the very first coaches that came through, I think, back when we were called the Entrepreneurial Strengths Finder back in the day. You were one of the first classes ever. Yep. Yep. And I remember driving you to the airport, which is a tradition with the coaches. I love driving our coaches to the airport. And I said, there's going to be a day in the future when we're going to call upon you to share your expertise. You're doing such cool things with both CliftonStrengths Finder and EP10, and that day is February 12th of 2016. We're super excited you're here. I have a tendency to go long in these introductions. I'm not going to do that today. This is our very first EP10 podcast where we have a special guest. And with that, Erin, can you tell us about your business, about who you are, and about what you're working on? And then Jim and I and the rest of the coaches are just going to hammer you with questions for the next 3 hours. Is that right, Jim? 3 hours? This one is a special version, special edition?
Good thing it's earlier here in Colorado.
All right. Okay, we know you're from Colorado. Talk to us.
Awesome. So let's see. I actually kind of have two jobs, I guess. So I have my own consultancy called Design Culture, where I've been working with a lot of tech companies around building better products. But one of the things I discovered very early on is part of that is creating great teams, which is what originally led me to finding Gallup and the Strengths Finders. Along that journey, I ended up joining a startup accelerator here in Colorado, and over the last 18 months, I came on board as their program director. So one of my responsibilities is actually building the culture of the accelerator as well as the program and helping them understand how to be great entrepreneurs. So when back then it was an ESF, but now EP10 came out, it was such a natural tool for me to pick up, especially in combination with the Strengths Finders, that I was just ecstatic about that. So so these days we're in our fifth accelerator program, and we've had the opportunity to use the EP10 in the last 3, and I'm really enjoying it. So
how's it working? I mean, what do? You said you had a class just yesterday or the day before. do they take it in advance? Do they show up with results? Do they do Clifton Strengths Finder as well? What are the nuts and bolts?
Yeah, so as an accelerator, we actually offer it as part of the kind of one of the perks of coming into the accelerator. We offer we ask them to take it actually before they arrive.
Okay.
So when they arrive, it's something where I get a look at the results, and what's really neat about doing it within the accelerator is it's about the individual, but for me it's even more about the team. So we get straight into what does this team look like, what is this group of co-founders, and what are the dynamics that are going to occur based on each of their rankings on the EP10. So usually it's in the third week of the program that we sit down. They've gotten used to us. They've had the opportunity to really challenge some of their businesses, possibly even put themselves under a little bit of stress, which means we'll see some of the team dynamics start popping up, and that's when we start kind of having conversations about what kind of insights does the EP10 give us about working together, what area of the business each person is starting to resonate and gravitate towards, and where is that benefiting, but also maybe where is it creating some unconscious frustration about they don't understand why one person wants to work over here, the other person wants to work over there.
Okay, so I have this hypothesis, and I'm going to maybe embarrass myself on live internet, but I've always, and some people have heard me say this, I've had the operating hypothesis that partners partner up with people that look like them or that act like them or think like them, etc. Are you seeing that? Are you seeing blind spots on the teams as they're coming through? Because they've self-selected, right?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. To be honest, I haven't. I find that every team will have a stronger one or two that they all rank high on, but in general, you don't get a very even. It's not like the list is exactly the same.
Okay.
So, and then also, I am starting to see some patterns, at least within the accelerator. And I have my own hypotheses about that from the outside, the way the benefits you get from an accelerator, I think it's drawing certain sets of entrepreneurs as well. So I tend to see some of common things low, but again, that's not always consistent.
So has anybody pushed back on their results? Are you getting anybody saying that's not me, or talk about some specifics? You don't have to use names, but what are some war stories from the trenches of Boulder?
Well, do you want war stories from the old report or the current report?
You can answer that any way you want.
So obviously I've been working with you for a long time, so I've had the opportunity to see the changes in the report. And if those listening haven't seen it, there was that strengths indicator, or kind of the
intensity.
Intensity, thank you, the intensity indicator. I would say that, here's the thing: these folks are coming in, they've decided to be entrepreneurs. And sometimes we'll have people that are later in their career, they've started multiple companies, they've decided to bring their company through this accelerator, and so it's not the 20-somethings. It's people that are more seasoned, and I'd say probably those are the folks that I've had the strongest reaction with sometimes, especially when it had come to the intensity piece. So, when you identify with being an entrepreneur, taking this test, sometimes that initial reaction, but what I've learned actually is that there's a misconception very early that it's telling them their skill, right? It's ranking them on their skill of something. So probably one of my specific war stories, I was talking to a set of co-founders, and they were both low on relationship. And they looked at me and they're like, well, I just don't agree with that, Erin. I don't agree with that. And I'm like, well, okay, well, tell me about that. They're like, well, both of us met at a networking event. and I stopped and, I laughed a little bit, and because I realized, right, they intuitively, what do you do when you're not good at something? Right? If you're smart, you go out and find those communities and those opportunities. If you're not good at selling and promoting, what do? You go to Toastmasters. If you're not good at networking, then you go to those networking events. So they had already chosen to find ways to shore up that skill because they didn't have, right? It wasn't at it wasn't their number one. And so what I said is great. All this is saying is that it wasn't a natural ability. You weren't the natural networker, but you've already taken the steps to build that skill, regardless of what your natural talent or your natural behavior was. So that's probably most of my war stories around a misconception between the innate behavior of resonating towards, wanting to build a relationship versus the things that they've already done to
shore it up. Yeah, right.
To shore it up, because they knew, right? They naturally knew, I have to network if I'm going to build a company, so I better figure this out.
Super interesting. That does kind of validate. I've always said, and maybe some of you, the jungle, if you will, the business, the marketplace is going to teach you those 10 demands are important. I mean, that's just called business. That's called free enterprise. I challenge anybody to disagree with that. It's a question of how soon can you figure it out? Can you figure it out systematically, intentionally, or do you have to learn the hard way? I mean, how many of these startups are getting funded or working on their technology only to find out when it's too late that nobody can sell? There's no promoter or sales talents.
Well, and there's another, actually, one of my favorite war stories was there's a CEO that took it and it put business focus or profitability as his number 10. And he came back to me and said, Erin, when I looked at this, I was angry. Because I was like, I built a company, I ran the books, like I was good at like understanding what my profitability was. He's like, but then I sat and I thought about it for a while and I realized it was the most hated and loathed part of the company that I had to work on. And so again, what he was like, wow, that's really interesting. I know I can do this. Again, I built the skill for it, but maybe when I start this company, I need to make sure that I find someone who does that, because I'm never going to like doing it, and it's taking him away from the part that really energizes me on the company. So again, it almost gave him permission to let go of that skill, because he was like, okay, I get it. So to kind of your original question, I've had people initially disagree, but the disagreement's been around the skill and their ability to do it. But when you reframe it, and I think that's what's important if you're coaching it, is to reframe it to the way you resonate with building a part of the company. Like if you were to wake up in the morning and say, what part of the company do I want to work on? That's where you're going to go, is your 1, 2, and 3. Then, then people would turn to me and kind of go, wow, that's kind of uncanny. And I'd say that, that I haven't had someone that just said, no, my number 1 or my number 10 is my most favorite thing. I haven't seen that.
Yeah. And again, you know how proud I am of Gallup, but we've had over 60,000 people through, and in all seriousness, I think I've had one conversation that I couldn't get them to where you got your folks, to kind of, if you just come at it. And again, and I think we're seeing this and hearing this from Erin, the power is in the conversation. The power is not necessarily even in the rank or in the label. We've changed the names, and you can tell it's our friend Erin she's weaving in and out of the old and new world, as I think all of your colleagues are, myself included. I have to always stop and, okay, is it creative thinker or disruptor? Which is the new one?
Right.
But it's the power of the conversation, and the systematic, objective ability to have the conversation. Because I think all too often these startups, they're just so wound up on maybe the product or the technology or X or Y that by definition their blind spots are blinded until it's too late. So as you know, we're really excited about the work we're doing with your accelerator and a couple others. Talk a little bit about what your mentors are. Your mentors using the results? Is it just you that is giving feedback, or is the EP10 got some legs, so to speak, in the rest of the programming?
Right. So that's a tough one. I'll admit. I definitely have tried to encourage our mentors to take the assessment. At Boomtown and most accelerators, the mentors, it's a volunteer kind of opportunity. It's people that are seasoned entrepreneurs, and asking them to take an assessment that creates their entrepreneurship. it's I make the ask regularly. I don't always get as much follow through as I'd like now. That could just be a time thing, you know, asking someone to take an assessment. Sometimes they need to find value in it. Interestingly, now the people, I'd say the people that are our closest mentors and the people that really believe in what Boomtown is doing get excited about it and then want to be a part of it. And I had a really interesting case where we had a gentleman that had been coming in to coach our CTO specifically, that his background had been, you know, more technical. And when I had him take it, it came back that his number one was selling. And I was like, well, wait, that's all about pitching. For us, you know, in the accelerator, you know, people come in and they're low in selling. That's why accelerators help people pitch. And I was like, I had no idea. Like, are you the one that usually goes out and really pitches your startups? And he goes, oh, absolutely. I'm the person that they put in front of the room. And all of a sudden I realized we were missing this opportunity with our mentor, with this specific mentor that we had looked at his resume, right? Said, okay, he's technical. We'll put him with technical folks. All of a sudden I was inviting him to our internal pitch events and putting him in front of people that were having trouble really articulating their value proposition. And one, he got more excited because he was using this kind of hidden talent that other, you know, he didn't mention to us. And, you know, teams were getting excited about you know, seeing him excited. So whenever I can, I use it as an opportunity to do the gap, you know, right, to shore up a gap, because I do think your hypothesis around people choosing people like them, I think unfortunately is probably more true when it's picking their mentors. And probably less with the co-founders, because, you know, right, we work with technical startups, so you tend to have, right, a technical person and a business sided person. So that already, just the fact that they are kind of a tech and a business focused person, tends to create some complementary aspects of the assessment. But when it comes to mentors, I'll find, you know, if they're high in creative thinking, they'll go after another ideator, you know, or a business guy wants to talk numbers with another business guy. So that's when I'm more concerned around the, you know, bringing on people that are like me.
Okay, interesting. You've touched on it a little bit, and it's kind of I'd say that of all the questions we're getting, we've been in the market for 2 years, well, a little over 2 years now. The relationship between CliftonStrengths Finder and EP10, do you use them both? And now we can even get into your consulting business as well. But what are some insights, landmines, experiences? Let's talk. I mean, we've got these two developmental psychometric assessments, but what's been some experience or advice would you give to our group?
Yeah, so first, I've always started with the EP10.
Okay.
So that tends to be the first thing people take. Another kind of, I guess, coaching tip is realizing that you have to, again, reframe that test as not being a personality assessment, that it's not actually telling you how promoter comes through or how the disruptor comes through, right?
Yeah.
It's just that you gravitate towards that part of the business. So what gets interesting is if when I'm working with a team, we will do strengths finders if they want to deep dive. So I consider strengths finders to it's like creating another layer and a deep dive into maybe how my disruptor looks. Because, right, you may have two people that are high in disruptor, but that doesn't actually mean that it comes through in the same way. Just like we know that's true for strengths finders, right? You can have two relators, but the way that kind of comes through is going to be different.
Great point.
So it's just, I find that it's one more step down, a little bit more informative and maybe a little bit more personal about what does it really look like for me to gravitate towards one of those things.
Okay, very interesting. Yeah, I've heard it described as, and it sounds like that's what you did, aiming CliftonStrengths Finder at the demands of an entrepreneurial role. So, but there's no magic formula. You know, a lot of our folks want a 2+2 scenario, and it just doesn't exist like that. Again, it's also part of the conversation that's just so key.
Mm-hmm.
Todd, let me ask the question because we've had a lot of people ask about the mappings between the two. In other words, there is, or early on, there was maybe an expectation that one did correlate to the other. We oftentimes say in the enterprise or in the workspace, StrengthsFinder says not what you do, but how you do it. So, Erin, let me ask you this question. In the field, have you seen or are you seeing consistent patterns of mapping that might make sense? Or is it more like that? In other words, hey, I might have promoter number one, but that doesn't mean woo always maps directly over to promoter. There may be other themes that are driving that. What have you seen?
I wouldn't say that I've seen any consistencies yet, but also I wouldn't say the data set would be large enough to start seeing those. But no, it's just like the strengths finders that the mapping always works, right? So if they're high in selling, there's always a reason for it. And I think it goes right into the same reason why you can't map a strengths finders to a job, right? It's why you can go into a law firm and everyone has a totally different set of top 5 strengths, but they can tell you exactly why that's why they're a lawyer, right? So it's the same thing. So when someone is right, when someone is number one again in business focus, and then you look at their top 5 strengths, they'll have a reason for why it's feeding that. And it's a very personal answer.
So you lead with the EP10. That's I have no competition when I'm set, but I did need to repeat. I did need to repeat that. But don't edit that part out, Carlson.
No, we're all good, Todd. Hey, let me ask can I ask a question from the chat room related to this? So JB asks, what additional materials would you like to see from the EP10? So as you're thinking about how you're currently using it today, what if you had a wish list of things that you'd like, what would those be?
Thanks, JB.
Is that for me?
Yeah, that's for you, Erin.
Well, so I know you guys have seen it, but I've actually created some of my own tools around it, specifically the team-based views. I had to switch it up because the intensities were shifted out, but I actually make a visualization that creates it's almost like a stacked pie chart that shows all of their rankings together. So what it shows them very quickly, and that's to be honest, that's usually what I lead with. So even though I start with EP10, I don't start with the individual EP10 conversation. I actually start with the team conversation. So it's what do you see here? So I had a team yesterday that or it's very common that you'll, especially in the tech entrepreneurial community, that you'll get, if we have 3 co-founders, they're very commonly that disruptor tends to be strong for all of them, right? It's in one of their top 3, which means if you look at this chart, right, that pie slice is way out here versus maybe their selling that's out here. So they're all of a sudden they see that. Or they'll see one person has something, but that someone else is only contributing a tiny slice. And so it creates a much more dynamic conversation about where people are at, or gosh, I noticed that we're always talking about the next idea and we can just get lost in these conversations about the new and next idea, and heck, that's actually spinning out of control because of the fact we're all number one on it. Or vice versa, if they're all low on something like that, especially on like disruptor. I had this recently, that they're like, gosh, we don't have conversations. No one's feeding, the conversations about what's some crazy idea we could do even if we don't do it. And so immediately you can have conversations as a team from that kind of visual tool to say, okay, well, we want to be innovative, we want to be disruptive. What process or thing do we need to put in place for our team to bring that to the surface on a more regular basis? And so it immediately gets them thinking about how do we want to change the way we're working as a team. So that's, I created, like I said, if I was to suggest a Gallup, and I know I've sent them versions of this, is again, if there was a way to group a team, to create that team visualization, it's right, we have that in Strengths Finders too, right? Creating those visual team sort of charts it creates a different conversation than looking at those individual reports that are in front of them.
Yeah.
Erin, I'm going to make a suggestion because I live on both sides of the world now, here both with Strengths and now EP10, and we just went through a learning series with our certified coaches, and we focused for a full hour on the team grid. And we have a team grid we've put out there. It's an Excel spreadsheet, themes across the top, people down the side. You start ranking them, things pop out. When I was asking for examples of that, some of our coaches have done actually the best job of creating very, very creative, like you've done with this EP10, where it works for you. I want to caution sometimes coaches in working in this space to really build your own. Come off of our example, but build one that works for you. Own it from that standpoint. Jump in, know the tool. I think you probably use your tool pretty well because you built it. Yep. And we'll provide some great examples for you. But I think there's a little bit of a responsibility in our coaching sector to kind of build some of those, make them yours, and then own them kind of going forward. Luke had asked a question, do you find your clients are receptive to the idea that they need a team that doesn't look like them, or is it their view that their side of the profile is the right? Like, in other words, I have the right things? What have you seen as far as how that goes when they receive it?
Sure, I definitely commonly get the question, well, which one of these is shown to be, creates the most successful entrepreneur? And I'm like, all of them.
The one that works the hardest?
Yeah. Well, no, you don't want too much determination, remember?
Right, yeah.
But I think, right, when you're working with a startup, unless you're working with a single founder that's looking for another founder, generally I'm always working with at least 2 to 5 co-founders, and we don't get into that conversation because this is their team. And so the conversation is, how do we take the team we have and leverage the strengths we have and leverage what each person has. And then again, for what I've learned over time through my coaching is that every single one of those business areas, there are things that you can do to build the skill in that area. And so that's what the conversation is about. So where they may naturally network and they don't need to put anything on their calendar, for the folks that don't naturally network, then the conversation is, okay, every morning for 10 minutes, you make sure that tomorrow you're meeting with somebody. You're always scheduling the next meeting. You're always scheduling the next meeting. And they have to create and force a habit versus somebody who doesn't need to. And what those to-dos are very different for each team, just because they'll naturally do some things and they won't naturally do other ones. So
I love that statement. I
don't
say it in such a sophisticated way, but you got to play the ball where it lies. I watch some of these coaches say, well, nobody's got business acumen or profitability now. We'll go hire a CPA or hire that. You don't have the luxury of hiring, gaps, especially in the beginning, especially when you're bootstrapping. So you've got to there's a lot of expressions. Play the cards you're dealt. Play the ball where it lies. You got to deal with your current reality.
Well, and to your point, I actually have never suggested that they hire for something in that report.
Thank you.
I have not done that because I do think that they can build the skill in those areas. There are some though, like for the folks that were low and disruptor, then that might be where I pull in a mentor. So again, I know I have a mentor that's just a ridiculous ideator, so I get him in a room with them. Or maybe that's an opportunity where they find someone that is on their advisory board. But I would not start using this as a hiring tool. I think it's a lot more of, right, you get to decide your ways of working, and that's what this does, is it brings up to the surface much more quickly the places where, right, if what we're trying to do is help them accelerate their company, they've got to figure out what are the tools they're going to have to use because they're naturally not going to accelerate their company in that area.
Love it. We're seeing more and more and more angels use it, not as a selection tool, and especially now that there's no intensity, or there currently is an intensity report, but very much of okay, how can I be a more impactful member of the board? How can I be a better mentor? How can I, help this team be successful? Have the same, investor and founder has the same goals about finding customers and growing a business. So we're starting to see and hear that, and it's exciting because that's exactly the way it's supposed to be used. How do I help them win? How do I increase their chances of actually finding paying customers? Great point.
Let me throw in one more question Rhonda asked, and it's kind of around the structure around how you coach, Erin. She says, how many coaching sessions do you typically do with a client? So can you kind of outline your structure a little bit and how that works?
Sure. So I think I mentioned this, I guess, when we were offline, but I'm in a unique position that I'm actually, the EP10 and Strengths Finders is a complementary tool to the main work that I actually do, which is the product consulting, as well as the program directorship at Boomtown. And so with in the case of the accelerator, I'm on site with these teams for 3 months. So typically, which means I have access to them and they have access to me on a regular basis, which means a lot more ad hoc coaching conversations occur than they might with somebody whose primary business is the coaching of the strengths. But we have, usually there's an initial kind of 30-minute conversation where I'm just getting them used to the report, taking them through it. I actually love to give a little history about how the report came to be, the difference between innovators and entrepreneurs, and I like a lot of those reasons about why this report was created by Gallup. I think that's important for people to kind of understand where it came from. And then just how to read the report and just initial team reactions. So that I don't spend too much time on it because they usually can see something pretty quickly and it allows them to start working with it. And right now they just need the time for it to settle. Then usually I will have a session with them every 2 to 3 weeks to kind of check in. One, because my responsibility as a program director, I want to know that when they said, okay, we're going to make sure that every week we have a little bit of an ideation session because we need to, do that, or I have to schedule my meetings because I need to improve networking, there's that accountability piece. So I take a little bit of responsibility to say, hey, let's check in again in 2 weeks. I'd like to know how that new habit worked for you and whether we need to come up with another one. And then so it's the coaching sessions, the structure of those are a lot more, helping them consciously use the tool and continuously come up with tactics to leverage the places they're high and to supplement the places that they're low, probably every other week for that 3 months that they're with us.
This is maybe way too tactical, but who buys the codes? Do you buy the codes or do you make them buy the codes? They're only $12, but
we buy the codes. So I actually I do a bulk buy, to be honest, because it's just really easy to send a group of people we send our cohort one code.
Gotcha.
And then also that means that I don't have to ask for them to send those codes to me.
Yep.
And I can see who's taken it and that sort of thing. So yeah.
That function, I got the question the other day from one of our coaches, didn't know we had. There's a code management component where when somebody completes it and you bought the code, you get to see the report. It's kind of tucked into the website, but you know where it is, right?
Well, yeah. And the nice thing is you can group, when you buy one code, you can actually name that code after something. So if you go under my code management, you'll see Boomtown Class of Spring 2016. And so everyone's reports are actually grouped under that code.
Oh, cool. Oh, good.
Erin, how much time do you think you spend when you think about looking at those reports once they come out? How much time do you spend actually looking and thinking through the reports if you were to kind of put that in terms of hours?
Before I speak with the teams?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I'll be honest, not very much.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the bulk of the time that I spend looking through them is on that per team and building the team visualization. So by doing that, I'm getting a sense of where that team is at, and by building that visualization myself. So, that probably takes me 20 to 30 minutes per team to look over that. So, but I find, it's having the conversation with them versus making up a bunch of stuff about them that's also more valuable. Because even when I talk to them, it's funny, I make jokes with them. I was like, it's going to sound like I'm telling your horoscope, but if I was to read this is what I feel like I might see from you. To be honest, in almost all cases, they're like, wow, that's really right. How did you know? But, I always, assume I'm making assumptions based on those reports. So I don't spend too much time. I make probably some pretty simple, fast observations while I'm building it. But right, they know better. My favorite thing is to put that team visualization in front of them and say, well, what do you see? What
And
do you
then
think? Where do you want to go first? I'd rather attack, you know, the things that are going on in their head versus trying to guide them towards some assessment or reading of the profile that I made up.
that's such a great point. That's consulting. I mean, that's the last thing you do is go and prescribed, and a couple good questions, as anybody who's bounced around the world consulting knows, are much more powerful than a big old PowerPoint.
Right, because I mean, if you think about as a coach, right, my goal at the end of the day is to help them resonate with our report and help them use it, not to prescribe remedies for their lows and
Yep.
pat them on the back for their highs. So.
Yep.
Aaron, last question from me. As we think about, if you were to give some advice, we've got just a boatload of StrengthsFinder coaches who are certified now and gone through this and have maybe not dabbled with EP10 yet. As you think about what you've learned, what kind of advice would you give to them if they were thinking, ooh, I've got some situations where this might be appropriate to start using? What kind of advice would you give to them to help get them started?
Well, so I'll be honest that I think the toughest part of the EP10 right now, coaching it, is I have found that my background in my business consulting has helped me resonate with each of those topics. And so if I was talking to a coach that was interested in starting to get into the EP10, you have to be able to resonate with each of those things. And I'll say that with StrengthsFinders, right, you can talk to anybody and kind of start resonating with those. But to go straight into the EP10 and not really understand or be able to coach around how do you improve one of those things, like what does ideation really look like and what does business focus really look like, you're going to struggle, right? And that's no fun for you, and it's no fun for the other person. So there's a little bit of the extra study. Now it could be as simple as finding your own business mentor. Right, as a coach, you have started your own business.
Yep.
And so it's good to kind of sit down and go, okay, well, what did profitability look like? And what did each of those aspects look like when I was building my own business? Because it's a lot more tactical tool, I think, in some ways than talking about those personality traits. So I think that's probably, to your point, why some people would hesitate towards it, and I think it's almost an appropriate hesitation, in my opinion, of like, hey, do I know enough about business or resonate with these things? So it's like pick up an MBA book, or pick up, go take a few classes on starting a company and understand what these folks are going through. There may be a little extra foundational learning that you'll need to do to really feel like you can go in and start working with someone. I think a great place to start with it then, if you really want to go into it, is probably maybe a single founder, or even somebody. Actually, I mentor somebody at a local college that's in the entrepreneurship program. Finding those kids that kind of want to learn along with you, I think, can be really fun, because right, they're discovering what it means for them to be entrepreneurs at the same time. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, I think safe opportunities, to coach people on this tool before you would want to sit down with maybe a co-founding team that's already under the stress of, I have to build this company well. I probably wouldn't start there.
That's such a great point, and it's something we're continuing to try to flesh out. I love that answer. There's a difference between entrepreneurial talent and entrepreneurship. We've all got some degree of entrepreneurial talent. Now, whether we're using it to start up, that's kind of the extreme over here, entrepreneurship, or whether we're using it at a college or a chamber or an existing business. We're starting to see a lot more coaching of the entrepreneurial talent in well-established businesses, because by definition, we better all be looking for new customers. I mean, whether you're IBM or whether you're a co-founder out in Boomtown and Boulder, you're looking for customers, or you should be, and using your entrepreneurial talent to develop those customers and turning the ideas into customers has a much broader application than, just high-tech startup. It's a much broader swath.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So I think maybe it was going direct to the high startups, the startup scene would be kind of an obvious, place
Extreme,
to go,
yeah.
but it would not be the place that I would suggest to start. While you were talking, I was already, here, right, in a lot of places now you have co-working spaces, right? In some ways, those are folks that are in a very early stage, are working on a company, and they're in that learning mode, not in that like stress acceleration mode. And I think that those would also be great opportunities to find people that want to learn along with you. Yeah.
Awesome. I don't have a question as much as I want to kind of close out. I know we're running out of time. By thanking you. You're awesome. You're a great partner. You're always very quick to be honest with your opinion about what we're doing, what we could be doing. That makes us better. I mean, our customers, our partners are like any business should be, both early adopting and also guiding. And you've always been that way with us. So thank you. Thanks for sharing your time today and talent. Keep pushing. Keep pushing us, and we thank you.
No, I thank you. I mean, if I haven't said it before, the insights that our teams get to have about what they maybe do too much of and what they don't do enough of when it comes to building their company, right? And these are teams that are all in and have taken the plunge. Having these sorts of insights is invaluable. So thank you.
Awesome. I get really excited about the Global Acceleration Network, about all the incubators. There's 7,800 of them around the world, where 10 years ago there were probably 78, right? I mean, they're so good for our economy and exciting, but as you've done perfectly and by way of best practice, brought the human capital to par, if not further than the financial capital. So often too many accelerators and incubators are just pure portfolio plays. And that's, the human capital is a pretty important piece of even the portfolio play. So thank you. And I was about to give your cell phone and everything out on the web, but I'm not going to do that. I don't know what your availability is. Follow-up questions. We'll respect the pressure on your time. Jim, do I do a quick update for the group?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah, we'll ask Erin to hang on here for just a second, and if you want to give it a quick update, that'd be great.
And I'll tie it. We've talked a lot about it. I'm going to go really fast. We are still, I say this every time, we are working on that intensity report, Erin, for you and for others that have experienced it. We were joking earlier. The intensity report is kind of like flying private aircraft. Once you've done it and had it, it's really hard to go back to commercial. So I'm not sure if there's enough.
The beginning is a strong reaction, but I think I'm prepared to coach the reaction for the good. So.
I know, and we're going to aim it to the coaches who have the ability and talent and hopefully training to. There was even some talk in the past about only making available to those that have been through class, EP10 class. Not sure if we'll do that or not, but.
Well, and I actually was one of the people that do support that, so.
Yeah, that's right. So it is coming. Dr. Bottle and her team are working hard on the book. We think the title will be The 10 Demands of Entrepreneurship. We're looking at probably a November release. We'd really like to have it in this year. If you can imagine, it's been kind of confusing. We have a book called Entrepreneurial Strengths Finder printed in how many hundred languages around the world that have the dominant contributing supporting. Not a day goes by I don't get an email from somewhere saying, wait, you change assessment, but it's hard to unprint books that have been distributed by Amazon all over the world. So we are working rapidly on the new book. And the last thing I want to maybe wrap with is we've got a really exciting global research initiative developing with some of our very best university partners. There is just no end to the power of research around entrepreneurial talents and economic development. We've got some great university partners. In fact, the next call to coach, Jim, if I'm correct, is with Mona Olson, who's over at Cornell. Cornell University has done some really innovative things with EP10, and we have a consortium developing. It's in its earliest stages, but we've got some really advanced global universities who are excited about partnering up with Gallup and with other universities. To be quite honest, we don't even have a name for this initiative yet, but it's coming, and it's going to enable Dr. Bottle's research team to just go deeper, deeper, deeper. As everybody knows, we're a research company. We never stop drilling. Maybe fourth and final update. We just finished our CET class in DC yesterday. Heard it went real well. Wasn't able to be there. Next one is in May. Of course, somebody on our team smarter than I figured out that I had scheduled one right in the middle of the College World Series. Not a good time to be trying to find a hotel room in Omaha, Nebraska, the greatest show on dirt. So we are pushing back that class to May 3rd and 4th. If anybody hasn't been or knows somebody that should come, we'd love to have you here at the riverfront. Jim, those would be my updating remarks. Again, Erin, you're awesome. Thank you so much for helping us these last couple years, and hopefully long into the future.
Erin, I'll say thanks as well. Are you coming to the Strengths Summit? Have you thought?
I asked her.
Okay, good.
Know about it.
So 18, 19, and 20 July, you might want to block that time out and come out to the Strengths Summit. That's as much for you, Erin, as it is for everybody else listening. That's my cheesy little pitch for that. You might want to come out and join it. Todd, I think we're talking about getting all our courses available around that summit. So that may be another opportunity here as we've got folks on campus to get that put out. So again, everybody's. Oh, go ahead. Did you want to say something?
No, I just said that's a great idea.
That would be a good idea, I think, to get it done. We the summit. Everyone's just drilling me for details, and I will have some late next week or the week after. So hang tight, guys. It's coming. We've got a website that we'll be setting up and make that available to you. And you'll know as soon as I know. As soon as I know, I will blast it out to the world through all our channels, through Yammer, through Facebook, through email, everywhere it goes. I will put that out, and you'll be able to see it. Just a reminder to take a full advantage of all the resources we have available for EP10 as well at the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com. Send us your questions or comments. You can send those in an email to us, coaching@gallup.com. One of the things for 2016, we're going to leave this Call to Coach EP10 update inside the Call to Coach channel. So if you're a normal StrengthsFinder and you're listening to it through the coaching through it that way, we're going to leave it in this channel. And as we get closer to the end of the year, we'll break that out and give it its own feed, so you can subscribe to it differently.
Now, can people share these podcasts on their social media?
Everywhere they want.
Can they send it to friends and family? We want to see millions of hits on Erin's. We want this to.
Well, we already had millions of people watching today.
Millions. I love it.
Let me look at the number. I think it's 11 million or something like that.
11 million
is what we had today.
Absolutely.
It keeps going. I said hundreds of thousands earlier, and now we're at the millions mark. But we make these available. Todd, if you're wondering, you could go to coaching.gallup.com here, and all of our webcasts are out there. If you want to share any of them, that's the perfect way to get that done. You can share them with the folks that you coach or your community or whatever. You can share those as well. Todd was talking about courses. If you want to find the easiest way to get a hold of all our courses and everything that's going on, we have a brand new website, super easy to find. It's courses.gallup.com.
Ooh, good name.
That's simple. You can find out what's going on in a great way around the world to find out some of our training opportunities that are available. We mentioned this. If you found it helpful, please share it. And we want to thank everyone for coming out for this special first ever EP10 edition of Call to Coach. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.